seventh grade? Did he have any problems in the seventh grade?
So seventh grade started up here in Jefferson. We moved back up here after COVID. I wanted to, Marcy, I think, had lost her job at Georgia Pacific, and I think had gotten another job in Douglas, I want to say, at an electronics company, and had lost that job. And so I started to think, okay, she was starting to show a little erratic behavior, what have you, and so I had reached out back up to Atlanta to see, COVID was not over, but it was winding down, if you will, to gauge where the industry was construction-wise and was things picking back up. So I made that call, and I had several offers, within a short period of time, and so I accepted an offer. And when I took that job, I originally left Fitzgerald by myself, came up to Atlanta.
How long were you here in Atlanta by yourself?
So I was up here for about, I know, at least a couple of months. And the thought process, I went back every weekend, to Fitzgerald. And the goal was to come up here, get established with work, and just kind of send money. She just put it in the bank. We didn't have anything really to pay for, thinking that at some point here, which we ended up doing, was we would all move back up to Atlanta, and we would have enough money maybe to get rental properties and just kind of start over in Atlanta.
Okay. And at what point did you and Marcy kind of split?
So that would be about the time Colt, in that seventh grade time frame. Colt originally started seventh grade, was really going well. But at home, I was working quite a lot. I'd actually had a job offer after the job I came up to Atlanta for, making more money, and so being the single income, like, okay, $20,000, $30,000 more a year made a difference for us. So I took that job, and Marcy at this point was not working and was not getting out of bed. I think we've heard the shape that she was in. I would come home from work and just, it was not a good thing. I thought that it was something more than the drinking, just because of the scabs on her arms. And so Colt and I would have conversations about that. And so it wasn't the smoothest in our house at that time frame, early seventh grade for him. So
what about at school? Did you have problems at school?
At school, about midway through it, he had came home from school one day and expressed that there were several kids bullying him. Originally, it was just kind of a mocking type thing. Colt's not, he was a real quiet kid. He was just super shy, is the best way I can put it, and the story that I got from Colt was it started with him eating lunch by himself. There was a group of 2 or 3 boys and a couple of girls at his school that would mock him. And from that point on, it was a kind of a difficult time for Colt through 7th grade, in school and on the bus rides home.
Did you move at some point during the 7th grade?
So I believe that we finished 7th grade, and I tried to make sure that I believe that he finished 7th grade, and I was getting close to coming to the end of the lease that I had in Jefferson. So working with my landlord, who Marcy and my landlord at that time were constantly having a riff with the neighbor next door. And I had told her, I said, listen, the call I got from my landlord originally that decided we had to move, she called me one day at work and said, I have called DFAX on your wife, and you need to come home or I'm going to tell DFAX to take the kids. And I remember this being a Saturday, and so I asked her what had happened, and she said there was a confrontation between her, the neighbor, and whatnot. So when I got home, I met with the landlord, and she said, this is what I'm going to tell you. I have no issue with you or your children, but Marcy can no longer stay on the property. So she has to move out of the house.
Where did y'all go from there?
So at this point, Marcy and I were not getting along, obvious reasons. So she decided, and I had called Debbie. So Debbie came up, took Marcy, Jenny, and Coley back down to Fitzgerald, and Colt decided he wanted to stay with me, finish out school, let's get through this lease, and then, just him and I kind of live together, sort of thing.
Okay. And when you brought him back to, where were you living when you brought him back? Were you living in Jefferson?
Well, so Colt and I never left, so we were living in Jefferson.
Okay.
Right.
And how old was he when you were living in Jefferson?
So Colt would have been 12 going on 13.
Okay. And when you were living in Jefferson, did you and Colt get along? Did y'all have any fights? Did he act up any at all?
No, we were, that was a time frame where I enjoyed really being with him. I had a little more one-on-one time with him. The bullying and everything, he could see I was up at that school talking with everybody on what to do, how to do it, getting him the counseling and everything, dealing with the principals, and just talking to the educators about where he was. What alternatives could we do for Colt to not put him around that type of thing? Could he just do his schoolwork up in the admin part, and not have to worry about that stress? So he appreciated that. And that's kind of along the lines where I said, listen, I want to explain to you how when I was growing up, when I had trouble or stress or whatever, at a young age, I was introduced to the outdoors, hunting, fishing. And I said, would it be something you would like to do? I said, we could hunt, and just kind of, my original thought was this would be a great way I could bond with my son away from his mother and everybody else, and just kind of use that time as I did as a kid growing up to just kind of, put him in a comfortable place doing something we like to do. And he could talk to me openly and freely about what challenges he may or may not be having. But also, a bigger piece for me was getting him away from screen time and computers and Xboxes and things like that. I don't mind that kind of thing, but it was just to the point where I felt like he was that was all he was wanting to do.
What kind of outdoor activities did you do with him during that time period?
During that time period, we originally just started just kind of going to some areas to look at deer and show them, where we would do these type of hunts. And then as I felt like he was wanting to get engaged with that, I had some people I worked with that had some farms and some hunting land. So I think it was last day of the deer season, actually, I had said, listen, let's give this deer hunting thing a shot. See what you think. Prior to the deer hunt, I think I took him to the range a couple of times. We had gone to Mike's gun room, talked with Mike, and I told him what I was planning to do with my son. I wanted to buy him a weapon that, you know, could shoot a deer and we didn't have to worry about it wounding it.
Let me ask you before you get into
Sure.
Mike's. Did y'all also do other things like?
So yeah, during that time too, I'm a big golfer, and I had little putting greens set up in our house, and him and I would putt in the living room, just kind of messing around. So I'd asked him, you know, hey, you know, would you like for me to teach you to play golf? I've been doing it my whole life, and kind of just a casual conversation, but he was like, I would love it. So purchased him some golf clubs off of Amazon. We lived in Jefferson still at this time, but we would come to the Chimneys here in Winder. They had a really great practice facility, and we would hit range balls, and I was trying to teach him how to hold a club, how to hit. We did that several times.
Did you also buy him a guitar?
So we did. Actually, I think that was later on down the line. You know, we played golf several times. We were practicing all the times, and I'm trying to just whatever I could do to just interact with him away from the computer screen. So he'd always had a interest in music. So went to Guitar Center on a whim one day and spent the afternoon in there and bought him his first guitar. And I'm left-handed, so we could not find one for me on that specific trip, and bought him an amp, and he started kind of trying to figure it out on his own. And then we went back. He enjoyed it so much, we went back and I bought him a second guitar, and I had found a kind of a beat-up, used left-handed guitar for me. And so that was another way that him and I kind of, on our one-on-one time, he was teaching me to play guitar and to read music, and I was terrible at it. And so we would sit in the living room and play guitars and things of that nature.
You mentioned Mike's gun room. Was there a time when you took him to Mike's gun room?
Sure. So we did the original, you know, deer hunting conversation. I had told him that we could go. I've been to Mike's prior when we lived here in Winder originally, and Mike's a good man, and so Colt and I went in there, and I was explaining to Mike what we were doing, and he understood it. You know, trying to get Colt engaged in the outdoors, and so kind of just going through the guns and explaining what all the rifles were. And Colt had seen me through the years shoot deer rifles on our farm in Statham, and him being a little bit little at that time, you know, he would see they were big, they were loud, and they kicked, you know, so he didn't want that. He didn't, you know, that was his thing, is he was afraid of the kicking. And I said, they're not all built like that. I said, so we'll go and talk with Mike. So we went in there and talked with Mike, and I explained to him what we were doing. And so Colt, through the gaming and Call of Duty and all the things the kids are into nowadays, a lot of the weapons when you go into a gun store are what I call on an AR platform. Everything from shotguns to little plinksters all look like ARs. In fact, the first gun I ever had Colt shoot was a little .22 on the farm that I had that looked like a gaming AR that they play with on Call of Duty. So my thought process was I will do whatever I have to do to get Colt interested in the outdoors. So he liked the way the AR platform looked. And Mike was like, okay, I have the Bushmaster with 450, look like the AR that we've all talked about here over the last couple of weeks. Different caliber, and it was big enough to take down a deer. So
is that the reason that you were buying this? Some people look at this weapon. It's a pretty ominous looking weapon.
Sure.
And some people say, well, that doesn't look like a deer rifle, but is
Right.
that what it
So
was?
the weapon in question that we're talking about here was a different weapon than the original one I bought him. Even the deer rifle, the Bushmaster I used, it looked just like the SIG that we've been talking about here. And that's just the way a lot of the guns and weapons nowadays are. You still have the old style bolt action kind of things, but a lot of the weapons now have gone to what they call an AR kind of platform. You may shoot a different caliber, but the way the gun looks is relatively the same. And he was interested in the way that looked. He thought it was cool. He's like, oh, I play this on Call of Duty. I shoot this type of gun. So
now this Bushmaster that you bought,
yep.
is that the one that we saw on the photograph that they showed yesterday at the gun range?
No, it was not.
Okay.
That was the SIG.
That was the SIG?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the one that you purchased first for him to use was the Bushmaster?
Yes, that was the very first gun that I actually purchased it before Christmas, and had, it was specifically for our hunt. It wasn't, he wasn't old enough to own the gun, which, we had talked through at Mike's. He watched me fill out the paperwork, and I'm like, you got to be 18. Went through this whole thing, so, which I explained to him on Christmas. Yep, I did give him that Christmas present, if you would. I didn't wrap it up as like this is a gift for you. I actually had brought it down the hallway after presents were open and said, I have one more thing for you. This is the weapon that I want you to shoot when we go to the range. And if you keep doing really good in school, going to school and doing all the things you should, you graduate and you're 18, I will, this will be your gun.
Okay.
So,
Was there a time when you switched guns?
so after that, he shot that deer. Last day of the season, I explained to him going that morning that I had hunted for several years as a kid and never saw a thing in the woods. That 95% here, we're not going to actually see a deer. We're just going to go through the process and let him see what it took to do the day in and day out, get dressed in camouflage. We weren't in the woods 30 minutes, and a bunch of deer came walking out, and he was super excited. And I remember telling him to just take a breath and make sure this is what he wanted to do. And he shot that deer, and the deer fell right over. So when he shot the deer, I was sitting right next to him, and the gun made a weird kind of sound when he shot it. And I looked over, and I could see the bolt was jammed, and the bullet was kind of half in, half out. He didn't notice, but I noticed that it had jammed. So after that, he said it made a weird sound and kind of a flash, driving home. He was like, it kind of scared me after I shot the deer. And I said, okay. I could not get the bullet dislodged from that gun. So got home, we sat down, took it all apart, got the bullet out. I think we went to the range sometime after that, cleaned the gun, let him shoot it again, and it jammed again on the range. So at that point, we went back to Mike's, and I explained to Mike, hey, it worked. It's a great thing. He shot a deer. It was the greatest day of my life. Made a video of it, showed it to his grandmother and some of my family and his mom. And I said, but the gun jam scared the crap out of him. And I said, during the course of that hunt, he'd seen some coyotes run through chasing some deer earlier in the morning. And I told him, I said, well, there's a hunting season for that, and explained to him I did a lot of hog hunting and whatnot. So after the gun jam, we went back to Mike's, and I told Mike, I'm like, listen, it was great. Gun jammed. I said, but even in his excitement, the 450 did kick a little bit more than, he was hoping for, I guess. And I did have a kind of a different scope on it than what we all see here. And he said when he shot that deer, the scope, it didn't bruise him. He said he just felt the scope kind of come up, and he didn't like that. So we traded that gun back in at Mike's, and I told Mike I was just looking for something a little lower caliber for him to shoot, that he was really enjoying going to the range and whatnot, and that we were going to do some varmint hunting, throughout the year in between deer season. So that's where the 223 came up.
Let me bring you back to during the time you were in Jefferson. Was there a time that the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office sent someone out to talk with you about some alleged threat?
Absolutely.
And did you cooperate with them?
Yes, I absolutely did. It took me completely by surprise. I remember getting up super early that morning to watch the British Open with Colt. I think we were sitting there at 5 o'clock because British Open time's different. So we're up super early. And midday, I think we watched part of the golf tournament. I fell back asleep, actually, and got a knock on the door. Two Jackson County sheriffs at the door.
Did they tell you what they wanted?
Sure. They asked me if Colt was there, and I told them he was.
Did you ask Colt to come out?
Yeah, I went back into the room, and said, hey, listen, the sheriff's department's here. They've got some questions for you. And I asked him at that time, like, is there anything I need to know about here? He was just as surprised as I was. So I went and got him and brought him back out.
And did the officer speak with him?
Yes, they did. They originally, before I'd gotten Colt, I'd asked him, what is this about? And he had made mention of Discord, asked me if I knew what Discord was. I'd never heard the term Discord until that moment. I told him I don't know anything about Discord. I don't know what that is. So when he brought Colt, we brought Colt out there, and that's when they had the discussion about computers and did he have a Discord account.
Okay. And after that conversation that he had with Colt, did he have a conversation with you?
The sheriff?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it was between all of us. I remember him asking Colt about Discord and what basically the allegations were. FBI had a tip, something about school shootings, and I immediately was like, I need to understand where this came from. This is it's an extremely serious thing for me. This is not a joking matter. Even if this is not Colt, I still want to know how it ends up that they're at my front door. I was very serious about and making sure Colt understood how serious this was, and ultimately, if they didn't like what he said, the second officer was there to take Colt with him. That's what the sheriff had explained to me. So I was, whatever I had to do to talk to them, anything they wanted to know, I basically was like, yeah, let's figure it out. I told him at one point in this conversation, if he even thought that this was related to Colt in any way, shape, or form, he asked me if I had guns in the house. I said I did. And that he could take them. He could take those guns out of my house. I will go get them. He can take them with him.
Okay. Did the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office ever follow up with you about anything?
So during the course of that, conversation with him, I was I wanted as much information about this as humanly possible. And at the end of the conversation, he and I walked away, walked over to his car, and he said, listen, I believe Colt. And I said, okay. He said, I've still got some more information I need to look through and go over. And he said, I'll call you. And the next day, I think, is when we talked. I said, do you have a card? He gave me his card. I said, I need, you can call me any time. You know, I said, if you find out any more information, I just want to be, I want to know what you know. You know, it was important to me right then to know what was happening. And he assured me that he would. So we talked the next day, actually, early that morning, I think it was. And he said that, hey, listen, I've gone through some more of my investigation. He said, he explained the chat room and how many people were in it. And then he said, he made mention of, I think it was Sacramento, California, maybe the IP address or something. It came back to somebody in California, and that it came back to somebody possibly in Russia.
Okay.
And so at that point, he was like, I don't see an issue here with Colt. And he said, you know, if there's anything else, I'll reach out to you, but there's nothing further at this time.
Did he ever tell you to lock the guns up?
He just, not necessarily to lock the guns up, but he said, hey, just make sure that there's not free access to the guns. He asked me where they were. I told him they weren't locked up. I said they are in my master bedroom closet where I kept the guns for most of my life. And when Colt was little, I said they're up on the top shelf of my closet, you know, not just laying around the house.
Okay. Is that, since he was 11 years old, is that the first time that he had any potential issues or problems, to your knowledge?
Problems with
acting out or acting depressed or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if that episode with Jackson County would be classified as a depression or whatnot. Nobody could really ever tell me if this was him, you know, doing what they were there to do. So we had, you know, there were times, you know, when acting out with Colt really wasn't something that was ever part of his makeup until he was old enough to start requesting, I would call, a little bit pricier things that I had to buy for him. And sometimes if he did not get his way about whatever it was, you know, we may have words back and forth. He's just a little impatient.
Would he throw temper tantrums sometimes?
Yeah, if he wanted something really bad after everybody moved out and it was just him and I did have a little more free reign with buying him things. Jenny and Coley weren't there. Marcy was not there. So I had a little more freedom. I was at a job making more money. So I could afford to buy him a little extra here and there. And so I wouldn't say he got accustomed to it, but he just didn't understand when he would ask for something why I couldn't buy it right then.